Hi everyone, I'm Natalie Long. Oh, sorry, microphone. I'm Natalie Long. Nice to see you all. I'm with the Region 9 lead-based paint program at EPA. My coworker, Angela Barenko, couldn't make it today, so I'll just be doing the presentation on my own. But we also have Ron Suchia here. He's also with the lead-based paint program. He can help out with some questions at the end because he has a lot of experience and expertise. So we're really grateful to have him on the team as well. So thank you all for coming to learn more about lead. I'm just gonna go through, oh here, sorry. So we're gonna start with what is lead and just kind of understanding where lead exposure comes from. So how people are exposed to lead, within their general life, and then also how the lead-based paint program is implemented, um, and then also who the partners that we work with are and who we rely on to accomplish the requirements and goals of our program. And then last but not least, we're going to kind of go through our regulations as well as possible steps that you can do to reduce lead exposure. All right. So the first question is just what is lead? So most of you probably have heard about it, but just to summarize, lead is a naturally occurring metal that is found in small amounts of Earth's crust. It's a colorless, odorless, and tasteless metal. It's mined and then used in products to make them more durable and last longer, but unfortunately we found that it has very serious health effects. Once lead is used in a product, it's nearly impossible to identify just like with the naked eye. So it's important to know that it also doesn't biodegrade or disappear from the environment over time. So it's really important to look out for it because it is in our everyday lives. So historically, lead compounds were added to paint to enhance the color and durability of the paint and also to reduce corrosion and shorten the drying time. Lead-based paint, if it's present in older homes built before 1978, may be a major source of exposure to those who live within those homes. So when paint surfaces are not properly maintained, paint can deteriorate, peel, chip, chalk, or crack, which can increase your exposure. And so lead can basically be breathed in or swallowed, depending on if you're just breathing in the dust within your own home or different buildings that have lead-based paint. And it's a serious issue for residents and also people. I mean, even children who go to schools within facilities that have lead-based paint. It can be a major exposure to them. So other common sources of lead exposure include drinking water that can be from lead within pipes. It can also be in food due to high levels of lead in soil. So if lead is in the soil of different vegetables or fruits that are growing from that ground, it's going to the food is going to contain it as well. They also use lead in children's toys and batteries, as well as some farm equipment and boats. And it's also been found in a lot of imported products. So products that are made in different countries that are then shipped here, countries that might not have the same regulations as we have, can be a major source of exposure. So it's important to look out for certain products that can include like pottery. I know in Mexico there's a lot of pottery that's imported. Sometimes unfortunately they have like sealant on them that has lead in it. Makeup is a big contributor to that as well, and different candies from different countries as well. So it's definitely prevalent. Okay, next slide. Oh, sorry. So now I'll just go on the health risks of lead. So all humans can have health impacts from lead, but certain groups are more vulnerable than others. So for adults, the health effects of lead include high blood pressure, fertility problems, digestive problems, nerve disorders, memory and concentration problems, sexual disorders, and muscle or joint pain. Um, but it's important to note that children and pregnant women are the greatest concern for the effects of lead exposure and are kind of the main focus of the EPA regulations that we have. So children under 6 are at most risk for small amounts of lead, and that's because their bodies are still developing, their brains and their nervous systems are still developing, and so therefore their bodies are absorbing more of the concentration of lead than adults experience. So they are more sensitive to the damaging effects of lead. And then pregnant women are also especially at risk from exposure to lead. I'll go into that in a few slides. So today, one of the most common ways that children can be exposed to lead is through contact with lead-based paint. And that can be from the chips or dust that are in buildings or homes that they may live or play in. So lead-based paint can also be present when they put toys or, children just put anything that they touch in their mouths, including their own fingers. And that's just kind of part of their normal behavior. But if they're touching surfaces like windows or something that has lead-based paint on them, then it's going straight into their mouth. And unfortunately, lead paint has a sweet taste. So I know that a lot of children will unawareingly touch something that has lead paint on it, and then they'll notice that it tastes sweet on their fingers, so they'll try to lick them even more. I actually yeah. Yeah, in the paint. Like lead itself just, as the mineral is, yeah. I actually met someone, we were doing a community, like one of these presentations essentially, and someone was explaining that as a kid, she used to play with a ball and bounce it against the garage of her house when she was younger. And she would always lick her hands because she noticed that the ball tasted sweet. Like something about it tasted sweet on her fingers. And it's actually because the paint on the garage it had lead in it. And so it was coming off onto the ball that she was playing with. And so she was, tasting that. And she now is aware of it, but I know that that's, it's a little too late. Okay, I'll go to the next thing. So the health effects on children. So it's important to note that there's no safe level of lead in the blood of humans that has been identified. So while some health effects may not be noticeable, the effects of lead poisoning can be permanent and disabling. So in children, even really low levels of lead can cause behavior and learning problems, slower IQ, hyperactivity, slowed growth, hearing problems, nerve disorders, anemia. In really rare cases, if they have very high levels, it's caused seizures or comas. And the scary thing is that these effects can result from even very short-term exposure. So it's just important to look out for it when you can. We'll go to the next slide. So for pregnant, as I was saying before, lead exposure is definitely a major health concern for pregnant and nursing women as well. Lead can accumulate in our bodies over time where it's stored in our bones along with calcium. So during pregnancy, lead can be released from the mother's bones along with calcium and can pass from her to expose the fetus or breastfeeding infant to lead. So that can result in serious effects to the developing fetus or infant. And that includes premature birth or underweight newborns, damage to the baby's brains or kidneys or other organs, and increase the likelihood of learning and behavioral problems. And it can also put the mother at risk for miscarriage. And I just want to reiterate that there is no known safe level of exposure to lead. That's one of the most important things that we just have to remember. And that's particularly important because the symptoms are not always obvious. Oftentimes, lead poisoning, the symptoms can be very nonspecific. So oftentimes they're kind of misdiagnosed or attributed to other causes, which is pretty unfortunate. And even small symptoms like a headache or stomach ache or irritability, fatigue can be signs of increased lead exposure. And because these symptoms are not very specific or could be similar to a flu or a different sort of illness, parents might not be alerted to get immediate medical attention. So it's critical for for children especially to be tested. You can go to local health centers to get your child tested for a blood lead level test. And I'll just kind of briefly go over, we have like 8 major actions that we've identified to reduce lead exposure. This is just kind of an infographic and I'll include it at the end. There's also a QR code that you can use for a web page that has more information on them. But so these actions to reduce lead exposure include keeping your home just clean, trying to clean as much as possible, especially because of dust. Lead is the most common exposure is lead in dust. So yeah, keeping your home clean, eating a diet high in calcium and vitamin C is really important. As I was saying before, lead, when it enters the bloodstream, it actually acts as calcium within the body, so it replaces calcium. So it's important for children, especially when they're developing, to have a diet that's high in calcium, and that can be, in different dairy products or vegetables, as well as vitamin C to kind of reduce the amount that it's affecting their body. Another tip is just washing your hands frequently. It's very basic, but very effective, and making sure that your family members are also washing their hands as much as possible, especially when you come from somewhere outside. You might be exposed to different things. Just wash your hands as much as possible. Also playing in grass spaces, we kind of have identified, a little bit away from like soil, or if there might be like lead paint chips around a building, try to avoid that, especially for children. Another major thing that I'll go into later with our regulations is hiring a certified lead professional for any renovation, repair, or painting job, anything that's being done within a home or facility. Having someone who is a professional, who is actually trained in proper containment and practices to reduce lead exposure is very important. Also, showering and changing your clothes when entering your home. This is definitely specific to people who might be exposed to lead, particularly from their jobs. If someone's like a painter or doing renovations themselves, you don't want to bring in that. You don't want to like bring the exposure that you just had into your own home. So just making sure that you're changing your clothes and showering properly. Also for children, washing toys, bottles, anything that they might be playing with or putting in their mouth is something that should definitely be cleaned often to reduce their exposure. And then lastly is running your tap water, especially if there's lead in the pipes, or at least in the faucet. If you run the water just a little bit, which I know at least in California with the drought, it's not, I try not to do that, but it's just a good practice to know that if your faucet might have some contaminants, you want to like run it a little bit so that you're not drinking that straight out of the tap. All right, so now I'm going to go into our lead-based paint regulations. So I'm just going to kind of give an overview of what our EPA regulations, like what type of building they apply to, also what kinds of activities they apply to, and the complying actions. So I will really quickly go into the definition of lead-based paint. So as I was saying before, lead is very commonly found, or the most common form of exposure from lead is in lead-based paint, so that's kind of why our program focuses specifically on the paint. So the federal standards define lead-based paint as any paint or surface coatings that contain lead equal to or in excess of 1.0 milligram per square centimeter, or that's more than 0.5% by weight. So paint with concentrations of lead lower than that definition can still cause health problems, unfortunately. And even paint with a small amount of lead can account for a lot of lead in airborne or settled dust. Um, so you can check, or yeah, you can check with like local health departments to see if they have any requirements that are more stringent than the federal requirements, but that's what EPA has defined lead-based paint as. So it's also important to note that lead-based paint was banned from residential use in 1978. Um, in practice, this means that homes that were built before 1978 or within that year could still have lead-based paint on them because existing supplies of paint containing lead would still have been available at that time. So that's why like 1978 is kind of the year that we really consider as very important when addressing our regulations. So as I was saying, a little dust does go a long way. EPA's regulations are very important because dust in the home is the most prevalent source of exposure for lead to children. So even if you can't see it, like even if a floor looks very clean and wiped down, only a lab test can really tell you for sure if an area is contaminated with lead. So unfortunately it is really difficult to see. Like you can't really see it with the naked eye. It's also very hard to clean. Normal cleaning methods won't necessarily pick up all the dust within a work area. Sweeping is definitely not enough, so you need to use like water, some sort of detergent, and a vacuum to clean up dust, effectively. Um, Lastly, also, unfortunately, dust does travel. So once it's released, it's easily tracked around, can come from outside, inside a home or a work area, and an exterior painting job can contaminate the inside of a home with like dust, chips, leaded soil if it's tracked inside. So it's not necessarily just if it's within your home. It's also like other facilities that you may be going to. You could track it inside. So that's why I was saying before, like changing your clothes, showering, proper, cleaning methods. So as I was saying before, 1978 is the main marker that we use because that's when lead-based paint was banned. But unfortunately, a lot of residences and a lot of different buildings were built before then and are still standing. And so that's good. But at the same time, they still have the lead-based paint on them. So it's just important to note if you know like people or yourself that live within a home that was built pre 1978, it may have some of that paint on it. Approximately 34 million pre 1978 housing units contain paint that meets the federal definition of lead-based paint in the U.S. right now. So yeah, that's a lot. It's good to know when buildings were created. All right, so now I'll go into the lead-based paint disclosure rule. So that requires owners of pre-1978 target housing to disclose to potential buyers or renters all known information about the presence of lead-based paint and or lead-based paint hazards within their property. So that requires that the potential tenant or person who's looking to buy the house is given some form of like EPA pamphlet like this one that's protect your family from lead in your home with a specific disclosure statement. So the option of whether to test for the presence of lead-based paint is actually, it's optional to the owner, but the decision not to test must be disclosed to the potential renter or buyer. And just a brief FYI, so the difference between, because you'll probably within the sphere of like lead-based paint and construction, abatement, or RRP are terms that are often used. So the difference between RRP stands for renovation, repair, and painting. The difference between abatement and RRP is that an abatement job is specifically performed to remove or control known lead-based paint hazards. So it's specific to lead hazards, and abatement firms that perform RRP, so renovation, repair, painting activities, still need RRP certifications. And then next, I will go onto our other regulations. So the renovation, repair, and painting rule requires any renovation, repair, or painting project in a pre-1978 home that disturbs lead-based paint that is performed. It needs to be done by a lead-safe certified contractor. So that's kind of like the hallmark of the lead-based paint program at EPA. So there must be a certified renovator who is trained in lead-safe work practices by an EPA or authorized state accredited training provider to be assigned on each job site. That's like the main thing of this specific regulation. So under the rule, contractors or forms that are performing renovation, repair, and painting projects that disturb lead-based coatings within child-occupied facilities built before 1978 must be certified and must follow specific work practices to prevent lead contamination. And so this rule, we use the terms target housing and child occupied facility. So basically, I'll just kind of give you the definition. So target housing is defined as a home or residential unit that is built on or before December 31st, 1977. So right before 1978 when lead-based paint was banned. Except for housing that is designated for the elderly or people with disabilities. And then a child occupied facility is a pre-1978 building that meets all three, or that meets specific criteria, that it is visited regularly by the same child under the age of 6. And yeah, so those are like the two terms that we kind of use. So it's target housing and then child occupied facility. And that's like if the child is frequently going to that facility. So a school would be included because they're frequently, there's a certain amount of like hours per week that we have to define it. And so an RRP certified firm must ensure that everyone in the renovation, repair, or painting job is trained to perform lead safe work practices. It ensures that all the people are also, they're assigned with a certified renovator to all the jobs and that they meet pre-renovation education requirements and also our record keeping requirements. So that's kind of it on the regulations. I didn't want to make that too long. I hope it wasn't. And now we'll go into the tribal-led curriculum. So the tribal-led curriculum was developed a few years ago after a request from our tribal partners to develop educational materials that they could use to raise awareness about lead in tribal communities. So I'll kind of use like the curriculum as a shorter abbreviation for it. So it was developed as a collaboration between the National Tribal Toxics Council, National EPA Tribal Science Council, and US EPA, with over 200 tribal representatives from 80 different tribes. and tribal organizations. I'll just kind of skip through this part. And so the purpose was to recognize lead, obviously, as an ongoing issue, and to raise awareness about childhood lead exposure, expand understanding of lead's potential impacts on children's health and cultural practices, and encourage actions that can be taken to reduce or prevent lead exposure. With the actions that I said earlier, like those 8 major ones, which I'll put at the end, are really like the main actions that we try to educate people about. So the audiences for these are instructors, so they're kind of people who can educate others about lead, and then so that can be like teachers, outreach specialists, social workers, youth leaders, community health workers. And then the participants can include really anyone within your community, parents, caregivers, even some children go to some of our sessions. I'm going to skip that because I want time. And so with that curriculum that we had developed, now what we really, we have kind of we call it community-led awareness, and it's just basically very similar information, but it's just free educational sessions that we wanted to bring to an even greater population around Region 9. So I just want to note that like we are continuing to plan even more community-led awareness sessions, and we're open to working with any tribe or community or anyone who really thinks that they're like the people that live within their community could benefit from these educational sessions. It's similar to the information that I had in the beginning, but definitely more in depth. And so the goal of these is to increase the number of community leaders that are trained in using and modifying the curriculum that we've developed, so that they can teach and spread or raise awareness within their own communities, and also to increase the general public's awareness about lead and preventing childhood lead exposure. So we kind of have 2 different sessions that EPA offers. The first is called Train the Trainer, and so that one it's about 3 hours, so it's pretty in depth, but we've done shorter and longer versions. But so the Train the Trainer session that training session that we offer is for community leaders. So as I was saying before, more like community health workers, social workers, doctors, public health specialists, people who have a little bit greater stake within their local community, who can take our curriculum and then share it with other people, families, or anyone within their community to raise awareness. So it's definitely more in depth. We offer it in English and Spanish. Unfortunately, we don't really have any other official translations right now. We're trying to work on it. And then, yeah, so that's the Train the Trainer session. And then the Understanding Lead session is more of just like a general understanding what lead is, what lead exposure, or what causes different lead exposures. And that one can be for families, children go to it. We've done it at schools. Really anyone who could benefit from this knowledge. And again, it's a little bit more of like what I started with, of just what is lead, what are the exposures, how can you prevent it within your home and within your atmosphere. And then lastly, I have this infographic again. So these are the actions that we've kind of identified to reduce potential lead exposure. There's a QR code. So we have like a actions, to reduce lead exposure webpage that has a little bit more like in-depth information if you want to scan that or not. All good. And yeah, that's basically my presentation. I wanted to leave time for questions at the end if anyone had any questions. feel free to ask them.
Yeah, I was just reading here too. It seems
Yeah.
pretty, it seems like the schools, the government's offering, if they got pipes that are lead in them, if they got pipes with lead in them, that they're offering them up to 10 years and the grants of funding to fix them.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was reading that right now.
Yeah, that's like a newer thing. Yeah, it is great. I mean, unfortunately, it's such a prevalent problem, but it's like not many people think about it. I mean, even I, before working in this program, didn't really know much about lead and how it's really all around us, and it's kind of hard to like prevent. I mean, you do as much as you can, right? You wash your hands, you try to make sure that your kids are washing their hands and stuff, but it's pretty hard to like, you can't identify it with your naked eye. And lead in pipes, it's like, what do you know, it's we're trying, but we're trying to raise awareness, and that's kind of the main thing that I'm trying to get at. You guys can feel free to, I'm Natalie Long, feel free to email me, especially if you want to try to set up like a training session within your community where we can come and give a more in-depth presentation for anyone who could benefit from it. Because again, it's such a issue, but it's really flying under the radar, and we're trying to just raise awareness so that people know. Yeah.
Quick question. My name is Delbert Altaha. I'm from the White Mountain Pack. Just thinking about homes that were built before 1978.
Yes.
How do you mitigate those paint? Do you put a primer on it and then repaint it or stuff like that?
Yeah. So that's what I was saying. Like the certified lead contractors is where you need to. It's so much better to go to I mean, our regulations like authorize it, that you have a certified lead contractor do any sort of renovations, because it's called containment. They have like specific work practices where they use like a tarp kind of thing and tape to contain, so that the lead is only within the tarp and the space that is the building, so that it's not coming inside. But unfortunately, so many people, do DIY projects, which is great in theory, but they don't realize that there are certain lead safe practices that they're not doing. And when you even like windowsills, if you're just changing a door or something, it can cause chipping to the paint and come inside your home. So yeah, there are very specific lead safe practices that the contractors or like workers with these firms learn. So that's why we advise that you guys go to those contractors. Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Lauren with the Center for Creative Land Recycling, and I wanted to let everyone know about a potential funding stream to help identify and clean up lead in tribal facilities, and those are brownfield grants. So with community-wide assessments, you can actually identify older structures that may have lead, also asbestos. Brownfield grants can be used to remediate asbestos and lead inside buildings. And actually the White Mountain Apache tribe has a community-wide assessment that they are using to test and abate cabins out at Holly Lake. So it's absolutely a use for the funding if you are concerned that you have facilities on your tribal reservation that may have lead paint or asbestos.
Awesome, thank you.
Theodore Poets Auction Indian Community. I am interested in the, I guess we have structures, they're older structures that probably predate that 1978 timeframe, but what's the process? Do we just contact you? Is it a grant application? What's the mechanism to, maybe start down that road?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it depends on what type of building it is. So if it's like a home, then you can go to whoever owns like the facility essentially, and they can get it tested for lead-based paint. Otherwise, yeah, you can contact either your city or like local code enforcement officers. If you look up, like, within your local community, you can also just contact EPA, and we can do that for you. Like, we can figure out who exactly to go to, because it wouldn't just be us as a federal agency. It would be more of like the local code enforcement officials, but we could contact them for you if you, we get a lot of like calls and emails with questions about that. So we can help kind of guide you to find the right people, because I know that sometimes it's hard to find online. But yeah, local code enforcement officers is where you want to look for.
Hello, my name is Cameron. I'm with the Intertribal Council of Arizona. Related to lead, we offer free testing for tribal school waters for tribes in Arizona, California, New Mexico, the Navajo Nation, and Nevada. We offer free testing. It's 2 samples per fixture. So if you're interested, just come talk to me and Natalie here. But I figured it's kind of related to your presentation, but thank you for all your information as well.
Yeah,
Appreciate
yeah,
it.
thank you. Okay, well, if there's no other questions, yeah, again, this is my contact information. Angela Barenko is my coworker. You can also contact her, or just both of us. Any questions, if you, again, want to set up a training for your local community, we're more than willing to. We just want to continue to raise awareness and do what we can to help, you know, everyone, including just children's health in general. It's like just something that we're trying to get the word out, because again, it's so under the radar, but it's really so important. Thank you all for coming.